Introduction to is the fusion of soul alchemy and in essence, it is the art of art as it pertains to identity in the information age. Can be practiced across all mediums of creative expression, but is most powerful in its digital mimetic form. Can be thought of as the art and science of drawing with ideas, alchemic cultural collaging or mimetically mediated identity. Integration. Identity is the canvas, culture is the paint, and the world is the easel. Mimetic philosopher's stone, philosopher's meme. To begin, you will need to externalize your core element of originality. This can be thought of as your unique symbolic signature which will be used to accumulate and contain future transmutations. Think of this like a unique mimetic Lego from which you will build new Legos and new mimetic structures. This original mimetic Lego contains all of your other Legos and all the structures you've ever made and ever will make. It should be simple and original. Spend some time thinking and experimenting with combinations. Rely on aesthetic rather than intentional. Meaning. The meaning is what you will spend your life unfolding/building. Think of it like mixture between a sigil and a meme peculiar to your essence. Spend at least a week on it. You will know it is complete when it meets these criteria. 1. It draws your interest. 2. Further changes detract from its mystery. Example. After you have constructed your philosopher's meme, you must begin charging it with fragments. Oibo or soul. Your soul fragments reside in the part of you which you don't know, but they will shine or resonate when you come near to them. Each fragment you collect is both a lock and a key component to further fragments. The resonance or valence of soul fragments is subjectively experienced. It will be difficult to detect and discern the subtleties of these feelings initially, so it is important to watch yourself until the one watching and the one being watched become one. Keep your attention on your attention, and sooner or later you will find and catch one of these feelings. When you do, note it, and pursue its source. You will know you found the source once you realize something you didn't already know about yourself. This realization can be conceptual, emotional, creative, or otherwise, but it will be new. In this way, the resonance of a soul fragment is the nearness to realizing the next note in the pattern of one's soul. These emotions are the experiences of the resonance of a soul fragment, and the intensity will tell you how near you are to a fragment. Give close attention to these feelings, and diligently hunt down their source. The most hidden and valuable soul fragments are mostly cleverly obscured. The more you attune your sensitivity to these emotions, the better you will become at discerning their trails, which can be windy. Soul fragments are both locks and prerequisite keys to other soul fragments, and the accumulated gestalt of your collected soul fragments is what determines the calibration of your mimetic resonance. Old keys will open new doors, and old doors will open new keys. Mimesis. Once you locate the source of a soul fragment, you must give it a form and a context in order to unlock it in your stone. Context is the spatio-visual gestalt of systems of other forms which impart structural meaning. One's internal context is the always evolving meta-context, mimetic ecosystem, from which instances of contexts are born. Captured soul fragments live and grow in the ecosystem that is in and of your soul, and it is the coherent diversity of this ecosystem of forms which soul fragment keys are derived. The creation, use, and evolution of keys are the primary implement of mimesis. The act of mimesis is the capture of a soul fragment, and the increase in the density of meaning and mimetic adaptation in your stone. A soul fragment is captured and integrated when the fragment is given in form and / or context which exists independently of the practitioner. In other words, the capture of soul fragment is its externalization. Externalization of a soul fragment is necessary to stabilize it so that it can be used as a reliable reagent for further mimesis without slipping away in the flux of the internal kaleidoscopic mimetic ecosystem. fragments. Soul fragments resonate near any meaning structure which corresponds to their form, and all forms are composed of the relationships between other forms. In this way, the interpretation or apprehension of a form depends on the systems of forms it grew from, and the corresponding structures in the beholder. Because forms are the relationships between forms, it is the diversity and depth of forms which determine truth adaptation capability. The navigation and building of these ecosystems is the art. Communicated forms as means. Forms are connections between other forms and subsets of forms, with the fundamental form being the asymmetric duality, the relationship between potential and actuality. Organic forms are those which have stable mean invariant resonance across mean plexes, such as water being wet and amorphous. The resonance of organic forms can be meaningfully superseded esoterically, but not exoterically. Soul fragment resonance. Soul fragment resonance can be thought of as a multi-locked door vibrating, experienced emotionally and intuitively, when you approach it with most of the keys, with the corresponding keys pointing in the direction of the remaining keys. It is analogous to keys on a keychain which glow and vibrate when walking down the street, magnetically pointing to an area. When that area is approached and beheld, a door appears with a multicolored lock corresponding to the keys needed to open it. It is a matter of mining one's souls, to reverse engineer the missing key and then realize it's latched them through. Memesis. When the last key is retrieved and used, the unlocked door becomes the key from which more deeply hidden doors can be unlocked. This is experienced as the externalization of integration, or the creation of something new. In another analogy, the keys have teeth which are composed of other keys, in fractal fashion. The door is a form of which one is only missing a few connections to realize, and once this connection is realized, it becomes a solid form, or an appropriate key for the specific lock, which becomes a new key when it is unlocked, to be used in combination with other keys to unlock more doors. The affinity, or resonance of soul fragments are essentially your nearest attainable expansion of identity, which is a transformative integration or an identity competence node. The integration of a novel form or capture of a soul fragment exponentially increases the number of forms or keys, and key combinations, available to the practitioner. Because forms are fractal relationships between other forms, the key complexity, novel soul fragments. Identity competence, potentially accessible to the practitioner exponentially increases. Each soul fragment is like a puzzle piece composed of an idiosyncratic arrangement of parts of other puzzle pieces which combine to form a unique puzzle. The skill herein is the navigation of one's keys, and this is called style. Soul fragments are nodes on the path of unfolding identity because they are instances of integration, which together form the meta pattern that characterizes one's soul. Each integration state or act of memesis is a unique partial soul print, which is the idiosyncratic composition of parts of other partial soul prints. In turn, every act of memesis becomes an input to a Gestalt recycling feedback loop. Soul nexuses. A soul nexus is like a soul fragment which contains many soul fragments. It is integration beyond the individual soul, or integration on behalf of others. Externalized soul nexuses are analogous to the works of the classics or the masters. They are works which define heroes. In this way, soul nexuses are to the collective as soul fragments are to the individual. Keep in mind, truth cannot be engineered, only expressed. Above the soul nexus is the soul origin nexus. This contains all fragments of all souls, and was released by and through the life of Yahshua, whose entire life was the most perfect externalization of the soul origin nexus. This can be verified by virtue of a transcendent identity being granted through memesis of Yahshua's life. A soul with a transcendent identity inherently externalizes soul nexuses instead of soul fragments. A non-transcendent identity receives soul nexuses from without. They are dead in the sense that they are not inherently sustainable and will be eventually subsumed by living soul nexuses. In this manner, those who do not obtain transcendent identities are at the service of those who do. Those who seek to engineer truth serve before the humility of those who seek to express truth. Interpretation of an integration state. The imputed meaning of an integration state has nested interwoven emergent meaning corresponding to the internal meanplex of the soul which created it. A soul being a unique arrangement of other souls. The externalized meaning structures point back to those identities and identity fragments from which they originated. Because of the increasing cumulative cost of higher identity states and the interlinking of all forms, even the creating soul will not have explicit access to all of the meaning contained in their own integration state. This is necessary for the growth of these. Certain meaning is dead meaning. The meaning of an integration state scales relative to the identity competence of the beholding identity. In this manner, integration states can be encrypted with meaning only accessible to those with a certain identity competence threshold and /or form affinity. Encryption can apply on a single integration state to many diverse meanplexes. The meanings themselves are derived from the constituent forms, each form's extended origin context, their spatial relationships, and the relationships between all subsets of all the forms. Many of these contexts and form subsets are only accessible with certain keys, and so it is in the arrangement of these which encryption can be laid. Without a transcendent identity, one can only derive one's own projections from integration states, because the integration is only made in reference to an individual soul. This is also true for transcendent identities, but since their projection is transcendent, it is possible to differentiate between projections. The key to discerning a non-transcendent projection is to simply imagine what one would do if they were mistaken about whatever one thinks is true. If one cannot conceive that they could be mistaken, and how it would change them if they were, then they are projecting, and are not actually referencing whatever they think they are referencing. They are referencing trauma. This should be employed on oneself and on others for sure orientation. Knowledge polarity continuum. The known, unknown, and intuition delineate the polar knowledge electrical charge spectrum. Known being positively charged, intuition being neutral, and the unknown being negative. The charge of a form is relative to the beholder. The essential characteristic of a soul is consent, and it is consent which regulates the flow of charge and equilibrium of identity. Consent can also be thought of as the net charge of soul. State-based identities. Outside of a transcendent identity, in state-based identities, there are four fundamental categories of knowledge. 1. What you know. 2. What you don't know. 3. What you know you know. 4. What you don't know you don't know. The maturity of a non-transcendent identity is determined by their wisdom of these categories. In this arrangement, one's true identity rests in number 4, because the truth of one's identity rests behind death, which is perpetually out of relevancy for the living. State-based identities are negatively charged, in that their equilibrium is always net negative because their consent to their own soul is conditional. A negatively charged soul attracts knowns, never to gain self-knowledge, because they cannot organically integrate the knowns into their soul without changing their net charge, and so one known must be ejected at the expense of another to maintain their chosen equilibrium. In other words, knowledge adapts them, instead of them adapting knowledge. The fundamental process of a negatively charged soul is to hold up their identity. The navigational conduit or pattern of holding up perpetually unknown to them, but known and directed by those who control the independent categories they identify with. In this sense, a non-transcendent identity is always leaking, unknowable to them in their state. A state-based identity identifies with temporal categories that are independent of themselves, because to do otherwise would mean death of all they've ever known. Transcendent identities. Inside of a transcendent identity there are two categories of knowledge. 1. What you don't know about what you know. 2. What you know about what you don't know. These categories are created by virtue of a transcendent identity unifying what you don't know you. Don't know with what you know you know. They are neutralized. What you know and don't know are integrated into a mutually contained fractal unit. This ontological category swap and simplification operation is produced through the memesis of the soul origin nexus. Correct. Transcendent identity. Every question is an answer, and every answer is a question. Transcendent identities are positively charged, in that their equilibrium is always net positive because their consent to their own soul is unconditional. A positively charged soul attracts unknowns always do. Gain self-knowledge, because they are able to draw a known from their unconditional, eternally. Positive, consent to maintain a net known equilibrium, they can neutralize and then accumulate unknowns by giving them novel form and context. A negatively charged soul, by its very nature, does not give their consent to self-knowledge to draw equilibrating charges from. A negatively charged soul cannot give novel forms and contexts to unknowns, only already known forms and contexts. This is the root of projection. The fundamental process of a positively charged soul is to unfold their identity. Transcendent identity identifies with an atemporal category that does not exist independently of themselves, by virtue of identification with the source of that category. Because transcendent identities have an eternally unique and inexhaustible privileged category as the basis of their identity, they are living participants in the navigation, or pattern of unfolding of their soul in the soul origin nexus. Soul fragment integration. The integration of a soul fragment is achieved through the internal neutralization of a negative knowledge charge. This can be done by stabilizing the negative charge in a context, or by capturing it in a form which you draw from your soul. Drawing order from one soul is induction of a positive knowledge charge which stabilizes it. Consent is negative knowledge charge, and gives it life in the ecosystem of its integrator. Integration occurs when you expand the scope of your identity, that is, when you create a novel form. And/or context. The creation or realization of novel forms expands identity because it increases the capability of the practitioner to synthesize and externalize ever more diverse novel forms of ever increasing meaning. Trauma. A rejected knowledge charge is trauma. Both transcendent and non-transcendent identities are capable of engaging in trauma. However, non-transcendent identities have their trauma within, and so can only see it without, or they must generate a new ontological identity, while transcendent identities are grown and maintained by the neutralization of all internal traumas. Digital methodology, templating. Templating is a powerful tool for memesis. The reason being is that it is a mean which can produce arbitrary novel memes with trivial changes, and link all of the generated memes to a memeplex. Templates are analogous to a chemical compound with a bondable region that is compatible with many diverse elements, which all produce novel and meaningful substances. They can be thought of a plant, which can have many different species of leaves grafted onto them and continue growing. In that more basic sense, they are like a joke which produces many new jokes merely by changing the punchline. They are a stable memetic structure which has a diversity of useful novel memetic balance. It is in the balancing of ironies that the art rests. Meta-templating is another powerful memesis tool. Continuing with the plant analogy, it is the grafting on of another template plant onto another one. The advantage to doing this is that number of memeplex form references made within these can be massive. In other words, it references most identities in multiple ways. If one has a grasp of the identities referenced by the templates, then it is trivial to reference many seemingly contradictory identities with a skillful juxtaposition, and these make for thrifty, virulent, and meaningful integration states. Every novel form one creates is an integration state, and so a good template can allow many people to rapidly construct and share in a novel and adaptable memeplex with relatively trivial individual contributions. A good template is analogous to a tree which grows diverse branches by grafting on it, diverse leaves. Cutting an element out of an integration state is not as straightforward as it may seem. When one extracts an element from an integration state, they are also extracting all of the context from which it grew in, although this is hidden in the apparent form, but still remains in the memeplex of beholders. It is this understanding which separates the adept from the novice. A novice paints with ideas, and the adept paints with the roots underneath ideas. and makes them into new plants, and in some cases, new ecosystems. The crown beam plex. The crown beam plex is occupied by those with transcendent identities, due to their technical identification with the fountainhead of eternal novelty. Those who have the keys to the deepest and widest forms will inherently be the first to integrate and externalize soul nexuses, and contribute to the locks of those thereafter, and also enjoy scaling passive encryption. With the transcendent level of encryption, all those who are qualified, known or unknown, will be living decryption keys, and those who are unqualified will misinterpret the meme to their own detriment and wander in their projections. Transcendent encryption is identity-mediated passive read/write need-to-know classification, which can be imbued with meaning unbeknownst to the imbuer, and derivable only with higher keys, or after the acquisition of not yet extant soul nexuses. The only good and imperfect human can do is repentance. A transcendent identity is a state of constant repentance to the truth, and transcendent mimesis is the art of repentance.